A study suggests Hong Kong will lag behind other Greater Bay Area cities in pay increase levels next year. Word that Sunflower Travel will stop paying its employees for 3 months. And no locally acquired COVID-19 infections for the 3rd consecutive day.
Good evening and welcome. Local and mainland researchers suggest Hong Kong will likely lag behind other Greater Bay Area cities in terms of its average pay increase next year.
While Hong Kong is expected to see wages go up by 1.7%, cities in Guangdong province may look forward to more than 5% pay hikes.
Hong Kong Baptist University and the South China University of Technology teamed up with local and mainland human resources agencies. They gathered information about employees' pay in the Greater Bay Area between July 2019 and June this year. Zhao Qing was excluded from the study because of a lack of information. The study shows that among the remaining 140,000 employment figures in total, workers across 8 Guangdong cities can expect pay hikes of 5.2% to 5.6% next year. Employees in Hong Kong and Macau would get a 2.2% increase at most. Particularly, job ranks at managerial levels or above in Huizhou would receive the highest jump, 8.8%. Some workers in Shenzhen and Jiangmen may get a 6.6% pay raise. Meanwhile, managers in Macau would only see pay increases of slightly more than 1%, while employees in Hong Kong are expected to get less than 2%. However, there's a big difference in starting salaries between Hong Kong workers and their mainland counterparts. In Hong Kong, those who have a diploma in secondary education and work in the retail industry will start at a base salary of $11,000 per month on average. A worker with an equivalent education level would only get 3,700 yuan on the mainland. Similarly, university graduates working in the IT industry generally start at $16,500 in Hong Kong. But the same graduate is only entitled to 5,400 yuan on the mainland. The research team noted although wages on the mainland are half of what people earn in Hong Kong, expenses on the mainland are relatively low.
Sunflower Travel will reportedly stop paying staff but will retain their positions starting December for 3 months. There's word that the travel agency issued a notice to its employees yesterday, saying the arrangement will be implemented in 2 stages. It noted that the government will stop rolling out the employment support scheme at the end of the year. Amid an unfavorable business environment, the firm noted that it will no longer be able to afford rent and salary for its staff members. Employees were told to reply by tomorrow afternoon whether they accept the decision.
The city reported 2 imported coronavirus cases today, bringing the total number of infections in Hong Kong to 5,310.
This marks the 3rd day in a row where no local cases were recorded. Kana Chiu tells us more.
Among the latest imported Hong Kong COVID-19 cases is a 28-year-old woman from India. She's joined by a 37-year-old foreign domestic worker from Indonesia. Prior to her diagnosis, she stayed at Silka Chun Wan Hotel. Starting today, the Department of Health will assess the efficacy and reliability of the loop-mediated isothermal amplification test, a more rapid COVID detection method than existing means. Tests will be carried out at the airport over a 2-week period. A roughly half-an-hour process, arrivals can take part in the screening on a voluntary basis. Their specimen will be tested by a private lab. So far, more than 5,000 people have recovered from the novel coronavirus. Since its launch in April, the special Chinese medicine outpatient program has offered free rehabilitative care for over 410 recoverees. Among them, 71 people took part in a clinical study. Undergoing 8 to 9 rounds of Chinese medicine treatment, the majority of them experienced an improvement in post-recovery complications, such as lethargy and shortness of breath. Organizers hope to work with at least 80 more survivors to enhance their understanding of how the disease can be treated. Although the local pandemic situation appears to be stable, the winter flu season is fast approaching. LegCo President Andrew Leung said citizens must take preventive measures for the sake of themselves and for others. Over at the legislature, staff members of the Department of Health administered flu shots for lawmakers for the 6th consecutive year. Noting the tight supply of influenza vaccines in the private sector, Secretary for Food and Health Sophia Chan spoke of an increased disease awareness in the city. She appealed to members of the public to get vaccinated as soon as possible and hopes for a record high participation rate this season. Kana Chu, TVB News.
European governments are scrambling to contain the latest wave of COVID-19 cases by imposing new curbs, including overnight curfews.
But protests against the new rules have spread, with some turning violent. Leslie Tang has more.
There were chaotic scenes on the streets of Rome as police fired water cannon at protesters. Hundreds gathered in the Italian capital to vent their frustrations. Anger is boiling over after the government announced new COVID-19 restrictions over the weekend that will last for at least a month. Cafes and restaurants have to close early, and cinemas, gyms, and other leisure venues have been shuttered. There are also overnight curfews imposed in some areas. Protests turned violent in the Italian city of Turin. Demonstrators smashed in shop windows, set off smoke bombs, and hurled bottles at police. At least 11 people were arrested, including 2 who smashed through the window of a fashion shop. Health authorities say the situation has changed to a widespread epidemic, differing from earlier when infections were concentrated in limited areas. Italy has topped 500,000 virus cases. The country's prime minister appealed to the public to follow the rules to avoid a general lockdown. Over in Spain, coach drivers staged a slow drive protest in central Madrid demanding government aid for the sector. This comes as Spain declared a new state of emergency to battle the second wave of the virus. With the disappearance of tourists and national restrictions on travel, the long-haul buses have been idle for months. Meanwhile, Russian authorities have issued a nationwide mask requirement. Health authorities registered over 16,500 new cases and 320 new deaths on Tuesday, the highest daily death toll since the beginning of the pandemic. Starting Wednesday, Russians must wear masks in crowded public spaces, on public transport, in taxis, parking lots, and elevators. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with the president of Sri Lanka in Colombo after China objected, accusing the U.S. of bullying Sri Lanka. Pompeo and the U.S. ambassador to Sri Lanka were greeted by the president's secretary and were escorted to his office. The authority comments by the Chinese embassy in Colombo came shortly after Pompeo's arrival. Washington said the Indian Ocean island must make difficult but necessary choices regarding ties with China. Pompeo's trip to Sri Lanka will be followed by a visit to the Maldives, another Indian Ocean island nation. It is seen as an attempt to counter China's dominating economic presence in smaller countries. Still ahead on tonight's news, the White House race heads into its final 6-day stretch. Qatar apologizes after authorities forcibly examined female passengers from a flight to Sydney. And locally, a LegCo subcommittee endorses the appointment of British Judge Patrick Hodge to the top court.
Welcome back to TVB News. As the White House race heads into its final 6-day stretch, the 2 presidential candidates are making crunch time appeals for votes.
National opinion polls continue to show Democrat Joe Biden with a comfortable lead in a race dominated by the pandemic.
Less than 1 week out, and both campaigns claim they have the momentum with Election Day looming. Joe Biden aims to expand the electoral map in the South, going on the political offensive in Georgia.
Donald Trump has waved the white flag, abandoned our families, and surrendered to this virus. But the American people don't give up, they don't give in, and surely they don't cower, and neither will I. I will put in place the plan to deal with this pandemic responsibly.
Biden's running mate was in Nevada, telling supporters to vote early.
We have 7 days to go. 7 days to go to change the course of our country for the better, to fight for working people, to fight for the dignity of work, to fight for collective bargaining, to fight for labor, to fight for organized labor, and to fight for the promise of America.
President Donald Trump focused on states that he flipped in 2016. He said Biden supported the North American Free Trade Agreement and China's entry into the World Trade Organization, both of which, he said, hurt manufacturing in Michigan.
This election is a matter of economic survival for Michigan. Look what I've done.
Nearby, just weeks after being diagnosed with the coronavirus, the First Lady drew a laugh from supporters when she mentioned her husband's Twitter habit.
I do not always agree with the way he says things, but it is important to him that he speaks directly to the people he serves.
Back in Washington, outdoor living art installations depicting a golden Donald Trump in various unflattering poses are causing a stir.
I've had Trump supporters say they want to rip them down. You go, you can't rip them down, they're people. And I've had Trump supporters say, you should spray paint over those things. And you go like, they're already spray painted.
Aside from generating conversations, the creators say the installations are also aimed at encouraging people to vote.
Elsewhere in the U.S., tensions continue to run high in Philadelphia following the fatal police shooting of a black man on Monday. Hundreds of protesters streamed into the streets and confronted police after the death of 27-year-old Walter Wallace Jr. The episode was caught on video and posted on social media. Emergency officials cautioned residents to remain indoors amid reports of looting. Dozens of people have been arrested. A lawyer for Walter's family says they had called for an ambulance to get him help with a mental health crisis, not for police intervention. The family says the shooting was unjustified. Police say Wallace was wielding a knife and ignored orders to drop the weapon before officers fired. Qatar's government has apologized after authorities forcibly examined female passengers from a Qatar Airways flight to Australia. The examination aimed to identify the mother of a newborn baby found abandoned at the airport earlier this month.
Australian media reports suggested the women were subjected to the procedure in an ambulance on airport grounds and that they were taken from the plane without explanation. General explains.
Qatar's government claims to have begun an investigation into the treatment of Australian women who were forcibly examined ahead of taking a Qatar Airways flight to Sydney on October 2nd. This after Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison dubbed the incident unacceptable on Tuesday.
We find this unacceptable. That's been the official message and conveyed very clearly in the investigation that, and it is, because it is unacceptable. I mean, it was appalling. As father of daughters, I could only shudder at the thought that any woman, Australian or otherwise, would be subjected to that.
Qatari authorities had been searching for the mother of a newborn baby left abandoned in Doha's Hamad International Airport last month. In Qatar, sex outside of marriage is a criminal act. This has led to migrant workers abandoning babies anonymously to avoid prison in the past. Qatar's government has yet to confirm exactly why officials performed invasive internal examinations on the women in question. Human rights activists argue such procedures conducted under duress are equivalent to sexual assault.
Back here in Hong Kong, a LegCo subcommittee has endorsed the appointment of British Judge Patrick Hodge as a non-permanent member of the city's top court.
During the debate, some lawmakers raised questions why judges from other common law jurisdictions, such as Singapore or Malaysia, are not recruited. Haley Joe reports.
LegCo's subcommittee on proposed senior judicial appointment debated on the appointment of British Judge Patrick Hodge.
More than 30 UK parliamentarians have written to this particular judge in the UK now, who's about to accept this appointment, that he shouldn't do it because it's just not right.
In a joint letter, UK politicians said accepting Hodges' appointment to a Hong Kong court makes British judges complicit in the human rights abuses being perpetrated by the authorities in Hong Kong.
因為覺得香港法治已死。
Many youngsters in Hong Kong think we should not appoint Lord Judge because Hong Kong's rule of law is dead. We should not appoint him and endorse the system anymore.
Lawmakers from the pro-establishment bloc questioned whether overseas judges do understand the one country, two systems.
我擔心將來萬一
If they have an incorrect understanding, or then the rulings they make affect our constitutional order.
Then it turned into a debate on separation of powers.
中央黨校教下佢哋咯。
Are you going to give them a lecture if there is no separation of powers in Hong Kong? Or are you going to tell them that the national security law is in conformity with all the human rights conventions?
司法獨立呢個唔係
Executive led is written in Article 43. MPCSC is the top level. We need to make it clear to the overseas judges.
即係呢一個，我覺得係。
We are listening to a maniac lecturing us on constitution right in the morning. This is ridiculous and it is shameful.
Some lawmakers asked the administration to expand its pool of common law jurisdictions for its recruitment of judges.
我哋睇到任命嘅
Why is it that over the years, when we appoint the CLNPJs, we confine ourselves to the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand?
佢哋嘅法律嘅制度咧。
Singapore, for instance, their legal system is not exactly the same as Hong Kong. So we haven't considered judges from Singapore and Malaysia.
Junius Ho and Tat Hui refused to back the appointment. Once the motion is passed at a council meeting, the chief executive will make the appointment. Hailey Zhou, TVB News.
Amid an economic downturn, unemployment rates for all age groups have gone up, especially among young people. Now some good news for job seekers. We get details from Dong Yao Nie.
The unemployment rate for Hong Kong young people has hit a new high. The latest figures from the Census and Statistics Department shows more than 20% of youths aged 20 to 24 are jobless. That's more than 10 percentage points higher than last year. Cherry, an Asian and International Studies graduate, is one of those desperate to find a job.
I sent 15 to 60 CVs and I got one interview only.
To help these young people, social service agencies St. James Settlement and Standard Chartered Bank co-launched an employment program. The Future Makers First Job Scheme provides more than 600 job opportunities at small and medium-sized enterprises. The 6-month program plans to match 400 secondary school leavers and fresh graduates from universities and post-secondary institutions with employers.
First come, first serve, but the most important, they need to join us free full-day training. And then after that, they can enroll on the apps to find their job.
Each enrolled SME will get a wage subsidy of up to $5,000 per month for each full-time worker it hires under the program over a 6-month period. And many companies welcome the scheme.
5,000 is not a small amount, right? Because usually the first grade income around 13,000 to 20,000.
Jimmy Wong expects after the government's employment subsidy ends next month, many SMEs may slash their intermediate positions and turn to entry-level applicants, and that can mean new opportunities for the youngsters.
Also today, job seekers came to Southorn Stadium in Wan Chai. Here, a 2-day career fair held by the Labor Department offers more than 2,500 jobs in various trades like retail and catering. Among the job seekers is Miss Wu, a Cathay Pacific flight attendant who just lost her job in the airline's recent restructuring. She says she's still looking for opportunities in the aviation industry, and this time she's considering an airport security position. The Labor Department says over 80% of the jobs available are full-time positions, with salaries ranging from $11,000 to $19,000 a month. Most of the openings target those with a secondary 6 education level or below and require no related experience. Dong Yao Nie, TVB News.
That's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.